So I'll ask you this question as we kind of close out here. I guess, who do you want as head coach? I think we're going to have the same name, first of all. Second of all, how much do you think this head coach will actually affect their draft this year? Because they're probably not going to get hired until mid February at the earliest. If I had to take a guess of when the Steelers have a head coach hired, that's going to be after the Senior Bowl. It's going to be directly before the NFL Combine. How much say do you think they'll have in the whole draft? Because I think we're used to seeing Mike Tomlin being a CEO type head coach who had a lot of roster control. At least it was, perceived that way by a lot of people. How much say do you think this head coach will have in their draft? How much do you think it will affect what the Steelers roster looks like week 1 next season?
I think I think if they end up going with an offensive guy, which at this point, who is that? Is that a
It
Kubiak?
would be
Is
Kubiak or
that Fieldhouse?
Shieldhouse. Yeah.
Shieldhouse is like the one that and it's like, again, he's a young guy. I think he's gonna if that's the scenario, I think we get to see 1 year of cook it, Omar. We're gonna get guys that Shieldhouse likes, but like go crazy, Omar. Just get good players, fill this roster out because I think the Steelers have been preparing for a somewhat of a situation like this. All the talk was they were getting these extra comp picks and all these extra picks and trades and stuff to get a quarterback, but it never really made sense because of how they weren't high picks. They're mostly day 2 and day 3 picks. So to me, what that says is this is a team that was preparing for, hey, we're closing a window. Some of you might have argued that that window had closed years ago, but in terms of like this core of this defense that we spent so much money on, that window is starting to close. So we're maybe going to see a season where we offload some of those last ditch Mike Tomlin guys. Like, is Jalen Ramsey back, or do we try to offload him? Is TJ Watt back, or is he gonna? Because he's been laying the seeds of malcontent for since last summer. I mean, if you go back and look at what some of the tweets that JJ Watt has had over the last year, where I think he's been doing a lot of tweets about, being appreciated by your team, stuff that TJ doesn't want to come out and say, but that maybe if his brother can drop some little breadcrumbs in the Twitterverse about, I think there's going to be a lot of turnover potentially. And when you have to eat a lot of dead money, you might be taking on a bunch of rookies on cheap contracts to fill out a team. And that's maybe why you're collecting all these picks. So if it's a defensive guy like Shula, I think we're going to see a pretty heavy. I think I think there's going to be a lot of unhappy fans if it's who we think it is, because I think the draft is a defensive draft, and I
Yeah,
think they're
I would
going to probably
agree.
hire a defensive coach. And so I think if you're a team that's going, we're going to pick the best available players. They're going to take a wide receiver because I think the fan base might tear down Acrisure Stadium if we don't draft a wide receiver. But I
I would help them in that effort. I I
but
would help them.
but I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on defense. And if we hire a guy like Flores or we hire a guy like Shula, I think they're going to have a lot of say in at least the types of players they want, if not the specific ones.
I think that's a good point because you say there's going to be a lot of turnover. I posted a video over on my channel just a couple of days ago how this roster, the way it's constructed, it's kind of older, especially on the defensive side of things. So I
A lot of
think
outs on those
if it
contracts.
if it is a defensive head coach, which I think we both agree, the favorite right now is going to be Chris Shula, if I had to imagine.
Hmm.
I could see him going defense heavy because TJ Watt, I know he's, with this team for probably a couple more years. He's making $41 million a year. Whether or not he's worth that is a completely different topic for a completely different time. He's on the wrong side of 30. Cam Hayward, he's phenomenal, but he's on the wrong side of 30, nearing 40 at this point.
Does he
Jalen
want to come
Ramsey,
back?
yeah. Jalen Ramsey's another guy. Does he want to come back? I think he could probably stick with a contender. I don't think he's, a positive at safety. I think he was kind of a neutral for the Steelers, especially down the stretch, playing safety back there. He's certainly not going to have a second prime. There's a lot of holes all of a sudden that we're talking about. We talked about the secondary. They're probably going to need 2 safeties, at least 1 new corner. The defensive line, they could always use some more guys. And then edge rusher, I'd like to think they're decently set with Nick Herbig, but we'll see what they do. They could go defense heavy.
Yeah. I mean, if there is a guy that I think is a holdover once he gets healthy. I do think that if we're looking at specifically both Shula and Flores as guys, I think they would see value in a player that is still under contract like Deshaun Elliott, assuming he comes back healthy. But beyond that, there's going to need to be, we don't have a true free safety. We've got Sean Elliott, he's much better in a box. He's much better towards the line. He's only going to have 1 year left on his deal, if I remember what he signed
Yeah.
correctly. So there is a chance that maybe they draft 2 safeties and one of them's the free safety mold and one of them's a guy who can, have a sort of who's the guy on the Rams that they've got? I need to look up them, but Shula has a guy that's on the Rams that plays that sort of slot nickel hybrid safety role. I could see, if you look at the Seahawks, another defense that's going to be quite similar. They drafted a guy that we talked about last year, Nicky Manwari, at the behind the steel curtain, and he was a guy where when we were talking about him as Steelers fans, we're going, well, he's a little rough. He's really explosive as an athlete, but he's not super great laterally, and he still seems to have like some coverage things. So what did Seattle do? They brought him in as their third safety, and they said, hey, go play that nickel slot. We're going to blitz you. We're going to have you play close to the line of scrimmage. I think that's the type of stuff we can look at. If you've heard any of Shula's interviews, he says he likes to build around the players he has and do what hits their strengths. So I think if he's looking to just draft the best players available, I think secondary is a place that there's a lot of good secondary options in this draft for both corner and safety. I think he'll have his pick there if he wants to spend higher on it or if he wants to go cheap and try to get some of these guys late and then kind of just fit the defense around what they do. I think that's why both of us are probably most in on Shula as the guy that we want. Because of that adaptability, I think that's the same reason why I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about Brian Flores. And I'm not going to say that I don't have some concerns based on how all of his time in Miami went down, but he was great when he was here, and he's become one of the innovative defensive minds since he's been to Minnesota. So, like I said, if they bring in a defensive head coach, it's not the end of the world. And, I'm excited because, if you're a Steelers fan, we're raised on that. That defense is what we know, right? So like,
Yeah.
it'd be good to see some innovations on that side of the ball. It'd be good to see some young talent get flushed in and allowed to develop, allowed to be put in positions where maybe we're actually highlighting and accenting what they do well.
Yeah,
Sounds refreshing.
I know that's a crazy idea. That's a crazy
Right?
concept. I would love to see the Steelers do that, even if they go defense heavy, even if it's Shula, which I think I wouldn't be shocked if they went defense heavy. Wouldn't be shocked if it's Shula. They need a second receiver. We all know that. I just want to see some young playmakers on this offense. Ryan, they have 0 young playmakers on this offense. They have DK Metcalf. Everybody else in that wide receiver room is expendable, like we talked about earlier.
Washington.
Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington. Listen. Pat Frymouth, Darnell Washington. That's a fine little tight end room. Whatever at the end of the day.
Pat's overrated.
If 81 is still on this team come September, good Lord, I don't even know what they're doing. But I'd like to think 81, he's gonna be cut, or he's not gonna be on this team one way or another. Please. That would be wonderful. Running back room.
Get Connor out of here too.
Yeah, Connor, I've already counted him out. If Cam goes, his nepotism brother is also gone. Bye-bye.
He I will say in December, he actually made some blocks.
He did. He was a decent blocker.
It took several years to get there.
Yeah.
But he's more of a fullback, and if our offense doesn't have it, then we don't need him.
Yeah. And, the running back room, it's a fine little running back room. Jalen Warren's fun. Kenneth Gainwell is a lot of fun. I think he'll probably be extended. Caleb Johnson, I just want to see him get used, dude. Like, that's all I want. Like, I'm not super high on Caleb Johnson. I'm not one of those guys that thinks Caleb Johnson could be the RB1 bell cow for this team if he gets the opportunity. But I just want to see him, man. That's so much of my gripe with like the Smith offense and Tomlin over the last year is just, it felt like there was a lack of willingness to kind of develop the guys that Omar was taking shots on. That's where I think Omar and Shula would fit very well if they're best player available guys. That's someone Omar has always been. And if Shula's kind of that guy, that's where it leads you to defense heavy. But I just want some young playmakers on this team. That's all I want, man.
I want some young playmakers, and I want whoever gets brought into OC to have some rhyme or reason to what they're doing. Arthur Smith had uh plenty of that, I guess. He had more than what we were used to over the previous when we first had Ben Roethlisberger's chosen offensive coordinators from his whatever his inner circle was. Because I mean, once we lost Arians and once Haley went, it was like, what did we? It's a scary list of names that we
Yeah.
trotted out as offensive coordinator. And
Yep.
tip of the cap to Arthur Smith. He at least was respectable. Like we've said before, he was a floor raiser. I had like I did a weekly column where we often did film review, and then we would do previews of the next game for each week. And the Arthur Smith offense was not perfect. We'll just leave it at that. There's plenty of
Yeah.
stuff where I don't know if we can fully place the blame on him, but there were also plenty of times where we've got wide receivers that are all running in the same area, and maybe that's on them for not understanding his concepts. But it just felt like for the last 5 or so years, everything on offense for the Steelers has been so laborious to even just get minimal gains. And I'm just looking for a coordinator who can find those easy buttons, design those easy runs up, design those little passes that are able to create yards after catch, create explosives. You've been a big advocate for the Chicago Bears offense and Ben Johnson this
It's
offseason
beautiful.
or this whole season. You know, I don't know that we'll get Ben Johnson, but if we get somebody who's, like even the shadow of Ben Johnson, I would not.
Can we get Ben Johnson? Don't even talk about the shadow of Ben Johnson. That would be a dream come true. I know everybody
Antoine
hates that he.
Randall.
Oh my god! Hey,
He's over there
hey,
learning.
hey! Assistant head coach in Chicago. He is someone Ben Johnson loves, by the way, and we know the Steelers love those connections. Bring him in. I I would be a huge fan of that.
I
But
mean, even if it's
there's
not
that.
OT, is he somebody who could step into like being the passing game coordinator?
There's a weird disconnect between Ben Johnson and those McVay tree guys, though. They all seem to hate Ben Johnson. I don't know
That's fair.
why. I don't know what the beef is there. If
Well,
somebody could tell me,
I'm curious about that because Ben Johnson in his opening press conference had that line about, and I liked beating Matt LaFleur twice a year. So that's my entryway into where the beef happened. And I'm sure he didn't just was that just an awkward guy saying that because he's been division rivals and like the Packers are like been the kings of the NFC North for so long that he was just taking a shot at the most notable one? Is there more history there that the just casual fans like us just don't have the insight on? I don't know. But that's a fun little rivalry. And, I would love to be a part of something like that again someday.
I would love for the Steelers to be competitive and to have some young playmakers and have a fun offense and a really good defense. And hopefully we'll get that with Mr. Chris Shula.